everybody who jumped on this call today in this video conference. We welcome your participation. Anna will tell you in a minute how you can submit your questions in the chat room following the speakers, following the Representative Wittke's speech today. Sorry, I stumbled over my own words there. But today, I'm pleased to introduce State Representative Bob Wittke, who represents the 62nd Assembly District here in Racine. Bob was elected to the State Assembly in November of 2018. He is the Vice Chair of Ways and Means, a member of the Colleges and Universities, Education, Jobs and Economy, Science and Technology Committees. So that's a mouthful for me to get out. He is a lifelong resident of the 62nd Assembly District and a 1975 graduate of Horlick High School. Bob earned his bachelor's degree in accounting from the University of Wisconsin-Eau Claire. So help join me in welcoming Bob Wittke. Bob, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much. It's always, I really appreciate those that have tuned in for today's chat. A little bit different than the last chat that I viewed. You had the top person in the assembly last time. I'll give a much different perspective, as I like to tell people that elected me that if you looked at, there's 133 people in the legislature, roughly 99 of us in the assembly, and 33 senators, and I was probably about, influence-wise, about 134 to start with. So starting in the first term is very interesting. And so some of the things that people normally ask me, when I was first approached about this, I was told this would be a chance of a lifetime. That has proved correct. Most people ask me a number of questions, but one that comes up is this isn't for everyone, and that is also proven quite correct. A couple of things that I normally am guided by, and that is when I was out in my first year when I got elected, I was out talking to different people in the community, and a gentleman sat me down outside of his house, and I talked to him for probably about a half an hour. And at the end of the day, he said, you know, every 2 years or every time there's an election cycle, he said, if I had even a penny for all the promises that you make to me about what you're going to do, he said I would be rich by now. And he said, I'm just going to wait and see if 2 years from now you're going to come back and promise me everything. And so it's kind of guided the way that I think. And that is that I can only work as hard as I possibly can to do the best I can for the constituents that have elected me in the 62nd Assembly District, as well as for the community in the county of Racine. And it's real easy to promise that you're going to do all kinds of legislation and make all kinds of change. And then reality hits you once you step into the Capitol and start working through a number of the very defined processes that are there to get things actually enacted into law. Another thing that I really has influenced me is I have a finance and accounting background, and I have a private industry lens. That has probably served me the best since I've been there. It's a much different than many others have in our caucus, and it gives you a different view, much like how you view things every day in your own business. I think it really helps in how you treat people, how you work with others, and how you the things that you want to try to accomplish there. I get along very well with Bob Lang, who runs the Legislative Fiscal Bureau. It's one of the support agencies that we have, and they do all of the basically proving out all the different numbers and things that we work with as far as the budget and everything else, and we can get a number of different analysis on different things from them. And when I talked to him at one point, he's been there probably for since the 70s and seen quite a few people come and go. And I asked him what would make someone successful in the Capitol, someone that was elected. And he only pointed to one thing. And he said, if you come here for the right reasons, you'll last a long time, and you'll have the greatest amount of impact. and I've always referred back to that, as well as I carry. When I was there one evening, I took a shot of the Capitol. It's a very beautiful place that is well lit up at night. And I always refer back to that so that I'm always reminded of what a privilege and what an honor it is to serve people there and the responsibilities that come with it. So those are the things that kind of drive you, like right now, driving towards a re-election into a second term. So what did we accomplish that might have benefited people here in this community this past cycle? I was fortunate enough to pass legislation, and that was one of the things I think that was most interesting, and that was that when I got into office, there were a number of different people that asked for the Miller Park tax to finally be sunset. I was fortunate enough to author that in the Assembly, and that was actually passed into law. And it's always nice that reducing taxes is the first thing that you do when you come to the Capitol with a finance and accounting background. One of the most satisfying moments that I had was I was able to get the Park Junior ROTC group. I think we had close to 100 students up there for one of our live floor sessions, and a group of them actually posted the colors. And so the reason that was so satisfying is that many of those kids in our high school hadn't been outside of Racine, probably some of them in their entire life. So to bring them to the Capitol, we took them on a tour, gave them lunch and so on, and then they posted the colors and actually watched some of the floor session. That was something that was very satisfying. A couple of the other things that we've got going on. So legislation takes quite a bit to get through. So Matt mentioned the committees that I'm on. The Ways and Means Committee, where I'm vice chair, is probably one of the most busiest committees that we have, probably has the most impact on many of the things that you do. Over the course of the session, we actually heard and moved 25 bills out of committee. We also had upwards of 28 hearings in exec sessions, and we heard things like the marketplace facilitator laws, which were designed to collect sales and use tax on internet sales. We had hearings on other tax legislation that I'll get to in a second. We also heard, of course, the bill that I had on the Miller Park tax, as well as we had a hearing at the end of the session where the city and county of Milwaukee came up to talk, to basically go over why they want to institute a local option tax to fund certain things. And so that was done basically so that we could get an idea of conceptually what they were proposing. One of the things that we did in the Ways and Means Committee that you don't see in some of the hearings is that we do a lot of talk about what the tax structure should look like in this state moving forward. And that's been a different piece for me, because now I've been in the tax profession for decades, as my kids like to tell me. And in those situations, you normally are trying to pay the most equitable amount of tax that your company owns, different disciplines. Well, now you kind of turn around and you're working closely with the Department of Revenue and other stakeholders. And the Ways and Means Committee actually is looking at the tax structure from how do we basically put something in place with the least amount of burden on our businesses, on our residents, but yet can fund all the things that the state is required to fund, like education, transportation, et cetera. And so we have started taking a look at different structures, researching what's going on in other states, and trying to find what we think would be the best structure moving forward. And that will take probably a good amount of time to come out in some kind of legislative package. But some of those discussions have gone on. One of the things that we hear a lot is people would like to see, they always talk about working across the aisle, so to speak. So from my perspective and being there, for example, in our committee, in the Ways and Means Committee, I believe 99.9% of our bills that came out were all with bipartisan support from the committee. In that committee, we sit in discussions with, doesn't matter really what party you're in, Republican, Democrat. We take all different ideas and try to forge the best possible legislation we can to get to the floor. And so sometimes I believe you hear, and what's publicized are all the political, what I would call the political disagreements or arguments, when a lot of the work that's done in the Capitol is basically done through committee. Every single law that gets passed goes through a committee, has a public hearing, is discussed, modified. We deal a lot with different stakeholders. Could be, I've worked with companies in this area on legislation, WICPA, as well as other groups that have an interest in the legislation that you have. And so I think there's more what people want to term as bipartisan activity than they are led to believe in many cases. We disagree on some fundamental things, but at the end, I believe everybody's trying to do the best. I mean, we worked with the mayor here, the other legislators that represent the city area with the development that was going on to try to get a lake bed grant bill in place. That was stymied by the Department of Revenue, or not the Department of Revenue, the DNR, and their analysis of what went on. But I think I hold the same values that my predecessor did, and if it's something that benefits Racine County, I think we should be able to come together as a group and work the legislation through the process to benefit our citizens here. And so we did a budget request to expand the Hiawatha service between Milwaukee and Chicago. And that actually did come out in the budget. I know so far that they've used some of the funding that was allocated to that, or the borrowing that was allowed by the motion that we made, was done to purchase new equipment that they're using. There are some track improvements they're making on the Wisconsin side at Muskego Yard location, they call it. But there's a lot to expand the service that's been stymied because the state of Illinois, they're having a problem working with Canadian Pacific to get something done in the Glenview area to do some track bypasses. So, that was one of the things that a number of the BRAMAC came to us with, as well as a number of other companies in the area that wanted that expanded service. So we worked with the downtown corporation to forward a request for transportation funding for Lake Avenue improvements and things like that. Now we didn't get that grant, but we were open to anyone that comes to our office that we can help with. And I think that's one thing I guess I should point out. I realize that you have a high-ranking senator, Van Weingarten, that represents this district, and he's got a position in the Senate leadership. Of course, Speaker Voss is the top in the Assembly, but many times I look at the role that I play. There are many things that we can get done from our perspective because maybe we kind of fly under the radar a little bit. Don't get me wrong. I have my sights set on larger roles. That's why I'm running for re-election, because I really believe that I can have a better impact. And if you want to know what that would be, I would love to be on the Joint Finance Committee. That would be the ultimate goal that I would have. That's kind of where all the action comes. So one of the biggest things we do is work through the budget process where a lot of the hard decisions are. And so I've been fortunate. I've started to gain some traction in the education committee, and I think that's as well as colleges and universities. I think I get the most joy out of being on the colleges and universities committee because I graduated from UW-Eau Claire, and when a number of my old college teammates and friends, when they found out that I got elected, they were amazed that I was on a committee that now oversaw the entire university system. And so I had a really good time from joking around with a lot of them, but there's a lot of serious work that we have to do. Education is going to probably be at the top, as well as the budget will be at the top of what we do in the next year. There will be a lot of tough decisions that we'll have to make, and we'll have to take a look at how we'll be investing things moving forward so that we don't put the state back in a tailspin, and that we can begin providing business a better environment to flourish where we were prior to the health emergency that we've got now. But those are some of the things that we have. One of the other things that I guess I should go over is that we do a lot of the work in the district. One of the biggest benefits I have is to be able to see things firsthand. I've been to a number of businesses here. It provides me the opportunity. I especially enjoy going through some of the manufacturing places, although I will have to admit that Eric Olson gave me a back room tour of the O&H Bakery, and I think I was the most fascinated by everything that went on back there. I didn't realize what a outstanding operation is back there. But we have a lot of, I was up at Wisconsin, a manufacturer that's close to me, and it's always good to go and see exactly how something is made, the type of customer base that they have, see the type of talent that they actually have back working in their back manufacturing operations. We're open to going to visit. I was out west of the I was out at one of the farms in our district, learning a lot more about planting crops, some of the things that they do now that certainly weren't that way when I was working on a farm at age 16. But we were out also at they have a number of sod farms out there, and just understanding, trying to understand what the frontline people do all the time, and then how does a bill actually, how does legislation impact them? Or are there other things that we can do with some of the things, the discussions that we're in? So I've been on probably several different presentations because we do go through a lot of background information that we get from some of the organizations that we belong to as legislators. And I've gone through a series on some of the K through 12. There was a series done on improving reading, and if you've ever listened to me before, I will emphasize this again. We have a crisis in the state. Only 40% of our children across the state, and there's roughly, I want to say 1 million plus students that we have, only 40% can read at grade level. And if you, with my work in the school district here, going school to school, my work that I do on the education committee, the public hearings that we've had, if someone can't read, the amount of the issues that come up in their life is just unbelievable. And we have to find better ways to get people to read. That's why one of the byproducts of working in committee, we heard a bill that was going to bring a pilot program to this state, where the state put up about $500,000, the vendor had to put up $500,000, and It's a pilot program for children that are in pre-K, going into kindergarten. And being part of the committee, I really advocated for, and meeting with the eventual vendor that was selected, was able to advocate that we be one of the 5 or 6 just school district areas that were selected for the program. It's called the Upstart program. Pre-K students that qualify for free or reduced lunch are given a tablet or a Chromebook by the vendor. There is no charge to the family for it. They have to have a parent that will commit to working with the child, and they go through about 15 minutes a day with automated work, and the parent is taught a number of other exercises that can be done outside of that. And if you see the statistics for how those students perform up through 3rd grade, and they were tracked in Utah, Mississippi, New Jersey, and a number of other states, really sets a great foundation for getting kids the ability to read by 3rd grade, which trajects into a better success rate as you get further ahead, 5th grade beyond, and into high school. And so I'm also big on improving our ability to do math. So I happened to see an article that I read where it analyzed all the high schools in the state of Wisconsin and the kids that come into the university system, and the number of students from those high schools that have to take remedial math. And unfortunately, the top high school in that article with the most kids taking remedial math was the high school I graduated from, Racine Horlick. And I don't say that to criticize the high school, but I think it just tells us that we're not doing a good enough job with what we have laid out to teach math, and I mean basic math, because I believe if you can't, these are kids going to college, if they're not entering with the right skill set, we're missing something back. I talk to other businesses. The 3 things that I hear the most when I talk to businesses, your size, any size, I need people that will show up and be timely and that have customer service skills. Can they do basic math? Can they read at an appropriate level? And I don't care if it's on a manufacturing floor, if you're working at the counter in a retail outlet, no matter where it's at. And until we strengthen that, I think we're not going to be able to close the gap that we have in our workforce development, which is another thing that basically I'm working towards with other groups to see how do we find ways to produce a better workforce, to produce more employees so that you have the people that you need to perform the tasks that you have. Beyond that, normally in the legislation, you normally do something I would say that are kind of like personal. And so one of the things that I have tried to become more involved in and advocate for is mental illness awareness and treatment for people in our society. I've gotten involved with the National Alliance of Mental Illness here in Racine, the NAMI organization, and try to support all the events that they have there. And I believe that we are going to see a much larger incidence of this as we come out of this health emergency, because there are just signals everywhere. I'm on with different health providers probably every 3 weeks or so, or every time there's something in the news that there are questions that you have based on certain parameters in the health emergency we have now. I'm normally on with Ascension Ascension and Aurora are the 2 main ones that are in our community, and they graciously answer all of our questions and some of the things that we bring to them. But they are fearful, as we are, that there is going to be a tidal wave of mental illness issues that we're going to have to invest in. We're going to have to find ways to incentivize people to get into the profession. The last session, we passed a bill on telehealth that I think will assist in this area. We did a number of reciprocity items in the last bill that we've had prior to the health emergency. And so I kind of go from where Representative Nygren has done a lot of work with what we call the HOPE agenda, which is heroin, opioid prevention and education. And I've watched how he started with a personal experience, and it flourished into a lot of bipartisan legislation. The last thing I'll say about things that are bipartisan and that really produce a lot of good things are, I know a lot of people, whenever they hear the word task force, they kind of roll their eyes and go, it's just another task force. The task forces are really charged with going around the state and taking public commentary from every corner of the state you have. You got to remember there are 99 different people in the assembly that represent every corner of this state, every one of the 72 counties that we have. And actually there's a lot of good bipartisan legislation that comes out of it. I look at the water task force they had in the last period, and Representative Shanklin and on the Democratic side was a driver with that benefits there are things that are going to come out in our university system, the things in the rural area that are being done. We had the Speaker's suicide task force produced a number of good pieces of legislation that were forwarded on, things that we took from communities that would, we hope, will begin to prevent suicides in our state, as well as in different groups, farming, law enforcement, and a number of other areas that we're seeing that, and especially with young adults. And I think that's, I often tell people that if you take a look at the news, I don't think in my lifetime, I've ever seen a headline where we saw in central Wisconsin where a 10-year-old walked out of the home and committed suicide. Just recently, I have my son is a freshman at UW-Eau Claire as well, but a friend of his or a person that he went to high school with recently took his own life. The Casey Shaw that went down to the lake and ended his life. We just believe that there are bigger issues that we're going to have to address and have to invest more in the next budget and find ways to make sure that people get services before tragedies like this happen, as well as finding ways in our school to make sure these services are available. And so I'm a big believer in targeted funding so that I know what we're spending and what we're getting for the dollars that we put in. And probably from there, I should see if there are, Matt, I don't know, questions.
Yep. We've got a couple questions. Just a reminder, it's probably easiest if you throw them in the chat room, but I know Anna's got a couple of questions already. It's easier than trying to have you raise your hand, but throw them in the chat room and we'll get to them. So Anna, you want to start with the questions you have so far?
Yes, absolutely. Bob, you absolutely hit on a lot of the audience that is here. We have nonprofits, we have medical, we have RUSD, we have Wisconsin products. So that was a great overview. We have UW Parkside. So definitely you keep yourself busy. We can tell that. So one of the first questions that came in kind of goes back to some talk about tax relief. So recently it was announced that there was Governor Evers recently announced tax relief for middle income earners as a result of the Wayfair decision. And I did look that up, and it has to do with online sales, e-commerce type of stuff. So can you talk about how any collected revenue is directed back to tax relief?
So, yes, I can. So the Wayfair decision was the one in South Dakota, which started taxation of internet-based sales. Okay, so when the state, so what ended up happening in the state is that the Supreme Court decision was narrow and applied only to South Dakota. So what most states did in the meantime is they enacted legislation that mirrored what South Dakota did, because the Supreme Court did not supply specific precedents overall. So when when the legislation came through after that Supreme Court decision, the anything additional that was collected on those sales, and the Department of Revenue is the one that monitors the collections that we have. There's a certain framework that's put into place where additional collections are then sent back down into the income tax brackets to reduce the rate of tax on certain different levels. Now here is, people talk about bipartisan support, and so one of the things I will say is that there was discussions to do only one level, which is the lowest level of income tax. So if you look, we have 4 income tax rates. So they wanted to apply all the relief to the lowest rate. Well, the compromise, there were many that wanted it to apply to all 4 rates equitably. The decision was made to go forward with the legislation to apply it to the first 2 rates, which normally cover what most people term as middle class wage earners, and I think that's up to about I want to say about 150,000 in income level at the second rate, and I could look it back up, but that's so that amount of sales tax collected each year now goes in to bring the rates down and provide tax relief at that level.
Thank you. So to switch to another topic that you are passionate about after being on the Racine Unified School Board, and you're on the Committee for Education, colleges, universities, is there anything being done with the budget to push more interest in the education field, enticing people to get into that field? If education is a first priority, what's being done on that end of the spectrum?
Well, so that's another good question. I would say that there are 2 things that have to happen. So I've attended a number of different presentations by the education schools in our universities here, and listened to some of the things that they believe need to happen to get more resources into the pipeline. But as far as budgetary dollars, there's a long line. Okay, so everyone wants incentives for doctors, dentists, psychologists. Let's see, I can go down all the professions. And one of the things when we look at an incentive that we've kind of talked about in more detail is just providing more money doesn't necessarily get what we need. And so we've talked about that we have to find ways where everyone has some kind of skin in the game. So a lot of times I've talked about apprenticeship programs that way. How do employers have some stake in the game? How does the state legislature, how does the individual that actually receives the money? But on the education side, there hasn't been anything from a specific budget dollar amount in the last budget that went to that. But there is a program that was allowed by some policy legislation, because there's a difference. policy legislation that led to a program that's being used here between UW Parkside and the Racine Unified School District. It's called the STAR program. And that's where there's a way that the actual certification, and this is happening in the special ed area, a certification can come through that program without having to get certified through the DPI. And I know that I passed that on to a couple of other regional education areas that are going to look to do this a similar thing. Some of the education departments tell us that it's not necessarily about incentivizing with money. It has to do more with just perception. Okay, so there are many, I believe, in the education field that believe that that they're not appreciated, and there are things that we legitimately have to do to make sure that that more people believe that that they're not the lightning rod for performance and everything else. And so there's more work possibly on the policy side, but no, to take it short, there isn't anything specifically in a budget side. If somebody has an idea, please let us know, and we'll see how that may or may not work into the budget itself. But we do examine everything in the agency requests and so on. And so that's something that we will be taking a much closer look at now with probably a little tighter budget to work with in the next biennium.
And is the best way to reach your office through if you just Google Representative Robert Wittke, your page comes up with the legislature? Is that the easiest way?
Yeah, and this is another point I'll make, because this is one that sometimes comes up a lot. Just so that everyone knows, we get this a lot. I have probably the best staff person, at least from my perspective, in the Capitol. She does a phenomenal job. We're partner in the office, but sometimes I think people get the impression that they handle all these things and we never see them, and that is not necessarily true. We go through all calls, all emails, all contacts that we have. We take a look at what the requests are, and then, like Terry will take on, like we had just a large amount of unemployment requests for assistance. So she took those on. Sometimes we'll come up with what we do to respond to someone, email, and then she'll forward it out. But I think people should understand that if an office is run the right way, the person that is in there with the person that's elected is just an extension. And I think that's one of the things. I mean, we have right now we're building a folder of things that we want to address should we be reelected in November. And this is what I tell people in the business community, what I tell people that I meet on the street. If you have an idea, contact our office and we will put it into that file and we'll take a look at it. We're looking, I work a lot with the DOT. We get a lot of requests on accidents, people that aren't happy with some of the work, and we have vowed to the DOT that we will deal with our constituents first before we bring up issues with them. And so we are the first contact for state issues, and that's what we try to pride ourselves to be.
Great. So we usually try to make this about 45 minutes. So we do have a few more minutes, and I have one more question. Speaking of re-election, can you briefly highlight some things you'll be working on more specifically in 2021 if you do get re-elected?
Okay, so there are a number of large issues. So first of all, we'll have to pick up where we left off in the last session. And so I was working on a tax bill for probably 6 months called the Taxpayer Enhancement package. that's the first thing that we'll pick up and try to push through, because it contains a lot of Internal Revenue Code conformity, a lot of things that affect our constituents with, as well as I work closely with the Department of Revenue in things that they want, so that their life is made a lot easier for the next tax filing season. I don't think I have to tell anyone that some of the things that we really need to deal with in the next session will have come out of the health emergency that we're in now, okay? So we will have to evaluate. So people ask me all the time, how come we are not out passing all kinds of bills and so on right now? Our focus is to, that bill was also bipartisan that we passed in April, to try to deal with the needs of COVID-19. So the focus of that bill was to provide the governor with all the things that he'd asked for, as far as reciprocity, a number of other things to make agency life easier. And our biggest thing was that we did not want to start spending state dollars until the $2 billion in federal dollars had been spent in the state. And so the biggest thing that we'll have to address next year is the budget. The budget is going to have to be looked at a little bit differently, because we're not sure. We know that we made it through this year with the budget work that was done in the 8 to 10 prior years. We're not so sure if that's what will be forecast coming up. You know, you're all business people. I frequent a number of them. Business is down, employment is down. There are huge issues that will have to be addressed in the budget. I think the second largest thing that we'll have to address is, I believe, one of the things that has come to the forefront is how we deliver education. And I think that we're going to have to take a very close look at just how prepared were we to do or to deliver K through 12 across the state. How about the educational experience we're getting in the university system, as well as UW and all of our technical schools. And so we're going to have to take a look at how do we fund education, and what are some of the things that are going to come out of this from a healthcare perspective. We have hospitals that, even though they're coded not-for-profit, have run up huge expenses. We're going to have to address some of those things in the budget. And I think, as everybody knows, there's only so much money you can spend. You cannot tax your way out of it. And so the biggest things that I look to address is that, like I said, I've got a number of things my constituents have brought to me, as well as actually how we're going to invest our next, to make sure that we provide business with the right environment to flourish in the next budget, and don't overburden everyone with tax increases. And there will be a lot of things that have come out of the federal legislation, CARES Act and so on, that we'll have to deal with from a tax perspective. So that's probably the number one priority, is to how do we get back on the track where we were prior to this happening. And then from there, the other things I look at is probably what are we going to do with education, because there's a concern that our kids are falling behind, a huge concern. Can we adequately build a workforce? And then what do we need to do to solve that, and to increase the number of professions that we will need to move forward? And I know our health industry is really concerned with the mental health issues that may come. So that's why I'm looking forward to the next session, and just keep crossing the fingers that I'll be in the same place the next biennium.
All right. That's about all the time we have for questions. We ran over our 45-minute allotment. So I just want to say thank you to Representative Wittke and to everybody who added questions to this conversation. I want to remind everybody that our next Business Matters chat will feature Police Chief Art Howell on Wednesday, November 18th from 2 to 2:45. We hope you can join us. And unless there are any last second points here, Bob, I want to thank you. Appreciate your support in Madison and the work you're doing. And good luck on the re-election. So thank you to everyone for joining us today.
Thank you all, and hang in there. We want you all to be successful. It's the last thing I'll close with.
All right. Have a great day.
Thanks,
Thanks.
Bob.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bob.